Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are doing something a little bit different. Usually we take this wide-angle lens looking at massive historical trends or, complex scientific concepts. But today we are zooming in, way in.
Yeah, we really are.
We are looking at a specific human trajectory that tells a much, much bigger story about endurance, adaptation, and frankly, just pure grit.
It is a fascinating case study, and I think
Yeah.
the reason we grabbed this particular stack of sources, which, by the way, includes everything from biographical data to dusty race records from the Association of Road Racing Statisticians, and some specific marathon winner lists like Grandma's Marathon.
Right.
The reason we chose this is that we aren't just looking at a spreadsheet of race times here. We're looking at a map.
A map of the world and, well, a map of a career.
Exactly. We are analyzing the career of Ukrainian long-distance runner Elena Plastinina. And our mission for this deep dive isn't just to rattle off where she placed. It's to trace how an athlete transitions from a national champion in the Soviet-era system, right, to becoming this global freelancer, winning major American marathons well into her 40s.
So for you listening right now, whether you are currently lacing up your shoes to train for a 5K or if the only marathon you actually run is a Netflix marathon on your couch, this is really a story about longevity. It's about what it takes to stay relevant and competitive for over 15 years in a game that usually chews people up in 5.
That is the key point right there. Most athletic careers are just short bursts. They burn incredibly bright and then they fade. Plastina's career is a slow burn. It spans decades.
So strap in, metaphorically speaking, of course. We have a lot of ground to cover. We are going from Kyiv to the shores of Lake Superior in Minnesota. We're stopping in Istanbul and taking a detour to a very intense sprint finish over in the UK.
That's a lot of miles.
Yeah, it is. But before we get to the finish lines, we have to start at the starting line. We need to orient ourselves in time. So the records we have pinpoint her birth date as November 5, 1963.
Keep that year locked in your head.
Yeah.
1963. Because the math we are going to do a little bit later is going to get very, very interesting.
Okay, 1963, got it. Now, her career really pops up on the radar in the source material in 1989. This is kind of her breakout moment. She becomes the Ukrainian 10K champion.
Right, this is in Kyiv.
And I want to pause on the specific numbers here because in this sport, precision is literally everything. She didn't just win. She won with a time of 33 minutes, 55.56 seconds.
Wow. I mean, 33.55 is moving. That is a serious, serious time.
Can you contextualize that for us? Why does a 10K time matter if we are eventually going to be talking about a marathon career?
It's about the engine. The 10K is a brutal distance. It sits right on what physiologists call the lactate threshold.
Right.
You are running just fast enough that your body is screaming at you to stop, but you have to hold it for over half an hour. It requires a level of raw foot speed that pure marathon sloggers sometimes lack. So, by establishing herself as a national champion at 10,000 meters first, she proved she had the turnover, the raw speed.
So she wasn't just someone who could run forever at a slow pace. She had wheels.
Exactly. And think about the context here. 1989 in Kyiv. This is right before the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The sports training systems there were legendary for being incredibly rigorous. To emerge as a champion in that environment meant you survived a very harsh selection process. You were forged in a very hot fire.
And that 0.06 of a second at the end.
Yeah. That tells me she didn't just win comfortably, she likely kicked.
Yeah.
You don't get down to the hundredths of a second in a long-distance race unless you were driving all the way through the line. It shows a competitive instinct right from the very start.
So she establishes the speed base. She's the champ in Kyiv. But she doesn't just stay local. The source material highlights a really significant jump in her career trajectory regarding national representation. We fast forward to 1995.
The World Marathon Cup.
This is a massive stage, but the detail that jumped out at me from the records wasn't her time, it was her status. The text notes she was the sole representative for her country, for Ukraine, at this event.
That is a profound detail, and I think it's easy to gloss over if you don't know how these events actually work.
Well, why is that such a disadvantage? I mean, running is an individual sport, isn't it? You just put one foot in front of the other. Why does it matter if you have teammates?
It matters immensely, both physically and psychologically. In these World Cup events, you usually see packs. You see the Ethiopian team, the Kenyan team, the Japanese team. They run in these phalanxes. They work together.
Oh, like in cycling.
Similar principle, yes. They can draft off one another to break the wind resistance, which saves vital energy over 26.2 miles. But more importantly, they provide a mental tether. When you are hurting at mile 20, And you are always hurting at mile 20. Seeing your teammate's jersey right next to you keeps you locked in. You are suffering together.
And Plastinina didn't have that.
No.
Mm-hmm.
She was the sole representative. She was wearing the Ukrainian colors, representing a nation that had only been independent for a few years at that point, entirely alone in a sea of other huge teams.
That is a ton of pressure on one person's shoulders.
It is, and it requires a very specific kind of mental fortitude. You have to be comfortable in the void. You have to be able to internalize your motivation because there is no one there to high-five you or pace you. You are quite literally carrying the flag alone.
The sources also mentioned she didn't just show up once. She competed in the IAAF World Half Marathon Championships in 1995 and again in 1997.
Which shows consistency. She wasn't a one-hit wonder who qualified by accident. She was consistently performing at a level that allowed her to represent her country on the global stage during that entire mid-90s window.
So we've established her credentials: national champ, World Cup athlete.
Yeah.
But now I want to move into what I'm calling the travelogue era, because if you look at her win list from 1993 to 2003, it reads like a flight itinerary for a diplomat.
It really does. And this is very characteristic of that era of Eastern European runners. They became traveling professionals. They had to go where the races were.
Let's trace this path, because the geography alone is impressive. 1993, she takes first place at the Kosice Marathon.
We have to respect that name. Kosice isn't just a race. It's the oldest marathon in Europe. It's in Slovakia. Winning there puts you in a history book that goes back to the 1920s. It's a highly prestigious traditional race.
Then, 1996, she wins the Istanbul Marathon,
Bridging the continents?
literally running from Asia to Europe. And then the lens widens even further. She crosses the Atlantic. And this is where the story shifts to the United States. In 1998, she arrives in Minnesota for Grandma's Marathon.
A legendary race in the American Midwest.
Now, for those listening who don't know, despite the name, this isn't a casual trot for grandmothers.
No, though that would be a lovely event. It's actually named after a restaurant that sponsored the early races. But the course itself, the course is serious business. It runs along the shore of Lake Superior.
The source notes specifically the location, Minnesota, Lake Superior. What does that geography mean for a runner coming all the way from Ukraine?
It means unpredictability. It's a point-to-point course, which means if the wind is coming off the lake the wrong way, you are fighting a headwind for 26 miles. It can be freezing cold even in June, but if the wind is at your back, you fly. It's known as a fast course, but it's a rhythm course. You need to lock in a pace and hold it.
And clearly she did. She won in 1998. But she didn't stop there. She stayed in the American circuit. In 2000, she heads over to the East Coast and wins the Hartford Marathon in Connecticut.
A totally different challenge. New England courses are rarely pancake flat. They have turns, they have rolling hills, they have humidity. So she's proving she can win on the flat, fast courses, and the grinded out courses.
And then the capstone of this American tour, 2003. She wins the Philadelphia Marathon.
A major city marathon. Lots of concrete, lots of noise.
Okay, I want to pull the thread on the dates here because this is where the expert analysis is really crucial. We said she was born in 1963.
Correct.
So let's do the math. When she wins Philadelphia in 2003.
She is 40 years old.
That seems unusual, right?
It's incredibly rare at the elite level. Most professional marathoners peak in their late 20s or early 30s. By 35, you enter the Masters category. To win an open marathon, meaning beating the 22-year-olds and the 28-year-olds who are in their absolute prime at age 40, requires exceptional biomechanics.
Why is that? What actually happens to the body that makes this so hard?
It's simple physiology. Your maximum oxygen uptake, your VO2 max, naturally declines as you age. Your recovery time increases. A hard workout that took you 2 days to recover from at 25 might take 4 or 5 days at 40. So to win Philadelphia at 40 implies she had mastered the art of training smart, not just hard. She was preserving her body while maintaining that massive engine she built back in 1989.
It's a decade of dominance. From Kosice in 93 to Philly in 2003. 10 years of breaking the tape.
That's the definition of a career. Anyone can have a lucky day. A lucky decade is impossible. That is pure discipline.
I want to zoom in on a specific moment that really tests that discipline. We're going back slightly to the year 2000, to the Reading Half Marathon in the United Kingdom.
Ah, yes. This is a great case study in grit.
The source material uses a very specific word to describe this race. It calls it a duel.
I love that. Duel implies aggressive tactics. This wasn't a time trial where they were just running against the clock. This was a fight.
Plastina is facing off against the Ethiopian runner Burhan Dan and Lynn McDougall, and the source says this was the race's closest ever women's finish up to that point.
Think about what that entails. A half marathon is 13.1 miles. Usually, by the end of 13 miles, the field is strung out, you have gaps of minutes or at least 30 seconds. To have the closest ever finish means they were shoulder to shoulder coming down the final stretch.
Sprints are usually for the young, aren't they? We assume explosive power fades first.
Conventionally, yes. Fast twitch muscle fibers degrade faster than slow twitch. But here she is, right in the mix, fighting for inches.
She finished third in that pack, but the proximity is what's amazing. However, there is a weird detail in the source text here that we really need to address. It's a bit of a mystery.
The age discrepancy.
We've been operating on the 1963 birth year,
Yeah.
which is in the biographical data.
Yeah.
That would make her 36 or 37 in the year 2000.
Correct.
But the text describing the Reading Half Marathon explicitly notes her age as then 44.
It's a stark difference. 7 years is a lifetime in professional sports.
What do we make of that? Is it just a typo in the record?
It very well could be a clerical error in the reporting of that specific event. These things happen in race results, especially back then with international runners. But I think it's really interesting to look at why the source emphasizes that number.
Go on.
Whether she was 37 or 44, the narrative the source is constructing is one of the veteran versus the field. By labeling her as 44, even if that might be biologically inaccurate, based on the other records, the reporting is highlighting her experience. It's framing her performance as a defiance of the aging curve.
So the story becomes, look at this older athlete hanging with the Ethiopian star in a sprint finish.
Exactly. It underlines the sheer toughness required. If she was indeed 44, a sprint finish record is almost superhuman. If she was 37, it's still world class. But the label 44 suggests that she carried herself with a certain gravitas, a veteran presence that perhaps made her seem older and wiser than the competition.
It circles back to that sole representative toughness we talked about earlier. She had the miles on her legs.
She had been in the trenches. And in a sprint finish, sometimes it's not about who is faster. It's about who refuses to yield.
I want to go back to Grandma's Marathon for a deeper look. We have the winners list source, and I love looking at lists like this because they are like geologic layers of history. You can see the eras shifting just by reading the names.
It's true. If you look at the winners of major U.S. marathons, you can literally trace the history of the sport's globalization.
So we see her name, 1998, Elena Plastinina, UKR. But who is around her?
This is what we call the Eastern European era. Look at the names immediately before and after. You have Russian runners like Lyubov Belavina and Zinaida Semenova.
And Alina Makalova from Belarus winning in 1999.
And Svetlana Eflev-Tkachi from Moldova in 2000. It's a very distinct block of time.
Why was that happening? Why were all these runners from the former Soviet bloc descending on Minnesota in the late 90s?
It was a combination of geopolitics and economics. When the borders opened up, you had this massive reservoir of talent, specifically women, who had been training in these rigorous state-sponsored systems. Suddenly, they had access to Western prize money. They were hungry for opportunity.
They were professional in a way the U.S. runners weren't quite yet.
They were incredibly resilient. They traveled, they raced, often, sometimes running a marathon every month or two, and they won. Plastinina was the tip of the spear for that movement. They were known for being incredibly tough, high-mileage runners.
But then look what happens to the list later on. The names change.
Drastically. As we move into the 2010s, the East African wave arrives in full force.
We see names like Elisha Barno.
Who won 4 times.
Yeah, and Sarah Kiptoo from Kenya.
The torch passes. The dominance shifts from Eastern Europe to Kenya and Ethiopia. Plastina's victory in 1998 captures the peak of that previous era before the shift occurred. She stands at a specific moment in history where Eastern European women really ruled the American roads.
It's also worth noting the other legends on this list. It validates her win. I mean, seeing her name on the same document as Dick Beardsley.
Oh, a total legend. The man involved in the duel in the sun at Boston.
And Lorraine Mahler from New Zealand.
An Olympic medalist.
And even recent winners like Dakota Lindworm from the USA, who has been tearing it up lately.
It puts her in truly elite company. When you see 1998 winner Elena Plastinina, we shouldn't just gloss over it. She beat a field that likely included other top Russians and Americans.
And even looking at the men's side in 1998, Simon Peter from Tanzania won. So Grandma's was already a truly international podium. Plastina wasn't winning a local fun run. She was beating the world.
And she was doing it under that Ukrainian flag.
Which brings us back to identity. You mentioned earlier the different spellings in the records.
Yes, the sources list her as Elena, Olena, Yelena.
It can be a bit confusing for a researcher.
It's a common issue with transliteration from Cyrillic to the Latin alphabet. Olena is the Ukrainian form. Elena is more Russian. The fact that the records fluctuate reflects that transition period of the 90s, a nation finding its own identity and her identity shifting along with it.
But the person running the miles was the same.
Precisely. The name on the check might have had a different vowel, but the VO2 max was the same. The grit was the same.
So let's synthesize this for the listener. We've looked at the data points, the 33-minute 10K, the solitary World Cup appearance, the wins across Europe and the U.S., and that final major victory at age 40. What is the main takeaway here?
I think for you listening, whether you are a runner or just someone trying to navigate a complex career path, the lesson is about the long game.
The long game.
We live in a culture obsessed with the prodigy, the 19-year-old phenom who bursts onto the scene. And sure, Plastinina was a national champ at 26, but the real impressiveness is the second act and the third act.
It's the ability to reinvent oneself.
It's the ability to keep showing up. Think about the logistics. Travel in the 90s wasn't easy. Navigating visas, different foods, different time zones, often alone without a manager or a translator, and doing that year after year, keeping the body healthy enough to win Philadelphia at 40, that is a masterclass in sustainability.
It's the difference between flash and fire. Flash burns out quickly, fire keeps burning.
And she clearly had the fire. She moved from the sprint speed of the 10K to the endurance of the marathon, adapting her physiology as she aged. She didn't fight the aging process. She worked with it, extending her range.
And she did it largely on her own terms.
That's the part that sticks with me the most.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought on that. We talked about that moment in 1995.
The World Cup.
I want you to really put yourself there. Imagine standing on that start line. You are wearing your country's jersey. You look left, you look right. You see teams of runners chatting, supporting each other, checking their watches together, and you are standing there in total silence. You are the sole representative.
The weight of that silence is heavy.
It's easy to crumble under that, to feel small, to feel like you don't belong. But I wonder, did that solitary pressure in 1995 forge the toughness she needed 8 years later, when she was hurting at mile 24 in Philadelphia or sprinting at the end of that race in Reading? Maybe she could do it because she had already learned how to stand completely alone.
That's a powerful thought. Maybe you have to learn to stand alone before you can outrun the pack.
It certainly seemed to work for Elena Plastinina. From Kyiv to the shores of Lake Superior, she ran her own race. That's it for this deep dive into the archives of road racing history. Thanks for listening.
Keep moving.